Hey, Planet Earth. It's the Untamed Druid again, coming at you live with the fourth installment. Calling this one Creation. So, numerology is going to again be prevalent. I'm going to talk about the different elements, the basic building blocks, the four divisions of matter and life. Um, and then really go into what I believe it means to be an artist and what it means to what art even is. Um, and then I'm going to talk about musical ear, which I'll get into once I get to it. So um, first off, creation. Some people believe in creation. Some people are Bible literalists, and they believe that God created everything, and God's a physical human who exists outside of time and space, and was able to create everything because of his omnipotence and unlimited powers. Um, and there's many more interpretations of these things, but just the basic idea of creation without necessarily, basically to include uh, atheists, because to me Christians can more easily align with what I'm saying, because I believe myself to be a Christian. I think my ideas are relatively Christian, at least in origin of their imagery and such. Um, yeah, in order to talk about creation to someone who's not willing to accept a God existing, basically, um, it's more just really, you just gotta give it to them in science terms. If they're a science person, if they're just an atheist but they also don't believe in science, it's they have no larger ideology. You can explain it to them on whatever ideological island they find themselves upon, but yeah, usually the ideology is science, and you can explain these things in a pretty scientific way. Um, where instead of God and all of these faith-based ideas, conceptions, you can explain a lot, especially at this point, not needing the faith. And the faith comes in once you get so far into science. It's just like, and yeah, here's where faith comes at this point. Once you understand so much about science, it's like, and then we get to this where we don't know anything, so we just have to trust. Like, we're at the point again where we don't know everything about the universe, and it's scary because we just exist here, and anything can happen to us. So um, I think that is the reality that rejectors of creation, ideas, the idea of creation. Um, so really, just creation is more of the ongoing process that we exist inside of. Like, everything around us is just the ongoing process of creation, and evolution is creation happening. It's like creation happening right now, like because it's currently happening, and it's the process of constantly creating, um, that is what imbues the world with life. And basically, in my understanding, people have just called the ever-sustaining and ever-present patterns of life, and the driving force of life, and just life in and of itself. Because if you look around and you really think about it, everything's pretty magical. Where does any of this come from? We just kind of come into this world, and we just accept it because we've been here for our whole lives. But how can you explain the world around you in any rational terms? It's we're not really given those tools and those skills based on that Prussian system again. But it's just limiting what we pay attention to harms us in such a way to where we're no longer able to take care of ourselves. So it's pretty scary. um, Here at Untamed, we're trying to take care of that. um, so art is an expression of life. So in my understanding of it, art is anything that a human does. So it kind of gets into the the new age art movements and stuff, um, where splashes, paint splashes, and squares, you know, uh, overlapping shapes and collages, bad collages, toilets by themselves, cigarette butts. See, I think this all counts as art, but it's uh, there's a modern uh, bias against accepting what I'm saying, because if everything's art, then you can't justify charging money to have people go see art. If literally everything's art, then it busts the system. So the system's just like, well, what can we qualify as art? Art is something that is hard to produce, or it's a really realistic drawing or painting or something. um, so we can focus on realism. We can focus on emotional resonance, or these different aspects that people really enjoy, where it's more of a focus on the crowd that's coming to the place to look at art. Because if everything in life is art, going to one specific place to look at art is something that doesn't make sense. um, so they don't, that's that all of these definitions that I'm giving and talking about aren't accepted, because then they just break down their paradigm of that those things are valid. Existence of art museums and things like that. Not that they're not valid and not beautiful, but just the idea of charging people money to see art, and the idea of artists starving and things like that. It's all very mysterious. So, um, yeah, um, anything that exists with intentionality behind it, and if basically, you could say that the big the energy behind the Big Bang that's causing all motion to happen, if you want to boil it down to science, that could be the God energy resonating throughout all of existence that just constantly creates. And that could be what we're talking about, on a purely scientific level. Just it depends on where you want to take it. Kind of forget where I left off, but um, what it would mean for an individual to be an artist is that the individual thinks that they're an artist. You know, um, it's all about you, and it doesn't really matter what you do. You could be doing anything and consider yourself an artist. Kind of forget where I was, but to be an artist just means, if everything's art, if we're going to accept that premise, to be an artist then just means to be someone who exists in the world and puts forth creative intent in any way possible. So basically anybody can be an artist. It doesn't mean that you're expert painter expert sculpture. Doesn't mean any of that. Those are modern condensed versions that it really only serves a bias as far as just fitting into that narrative of this person's an artist and they produce art and that's what they do, and this person's a carpenter and they produce carpentry and that's what they do. It's like carpentry's art. This person works on human bodies, that's what they do. It's like, well, that's art. It's like all of these things are art. So any distinction is just from a lack of practical knowledge of the similarities that exist. So yeah, so as far as numerology goes, 4 is the number of creation. 4 are the basic building blocks, the elements of creation, the number of the basic elements. And those basic elements are fire, water, air, and earth. Much like Avatar, Last Airbender on Nickelodeon, or Harry Potter, like I said last video. The different houses representing the different elements, and those different colors representing those different elements too. Yeah. So understanding the elements is imperative to basically human psychology. I believe it's Jung talks about the 4 distinctions of the mind. Maybe that's not right, but the id, the ego, the superego, and then I think it's ego ideal. But at the basis of anything that you're going to study are these numerological systems, and I'm just trying to point out that 4 is the number of creation. So there has to be 4 distinctions for creation to be taking place in the physical space. So you can think of a plant. Plant needs the earth, which is what it's planted in. It needs water, which is the water that you water it with. It needs air, which is the air. And then they also need air movement too, so they don't stagnate. But then they need the sun, or the heat, the fire. And that's the sun, the light, that causes them to activate and go through photosynthesis and generate food and be able to survive. So those are the basic elements in their most basic ideal form, in the easiest way to understand it. So and then once you journey over to psychology, you still have those elements of fire, water, earth, and air. But now you have to map those distinctions into a way that can be understood when talking about something that is not abstract. So you have to be able to map these abstractions onto this real world phenomenon. And that's the skill of alchemy. That's what alchemists are doing. It's very difficult to do, but once you can reduce everything down to relatable comparisons, then everything just kind of lines up. and it's like one of those things where you see an image, but it's just like a bunch of splintered lines, and it's just floating in this kind of like circular space, and you can kind of tilt the space around and see all the different shards. But if you look at it at the perfect angle, you see a picture that you can't see from any other angle, and it's just perfect, and it's so yeah, to me, that's that's how life is, and really, um, these the numerology it orients you so you know where to turn to see the picture clearly, so it's not, it's totally a personal thing, but also it's not it's not really guiding you and telling you what to do, so you still have to know how to be able to interact, and then it's how to assign values to abstract concepts, and then how to basically, by manipulating the abstract concepts, you manipulate their real world counterparts. Once you make that connection, then once you alter them in your mind, you can alter them in real life, and once you make the connection, then it's there. Almost anything's possible is the idea. Um, so it's just extrapolating that idea, and really understanding what the distinctions are. Dry, wet, cold, and heat. Those are the different distinctions. Um, Harry Potter is courage, knowledge, friendship, and like cunning or something. Uh, there's different manifestations of the four, and any manifestation of four is going to be a different manifestation of these four elements. And that's just what the distinction of four is. So it's present anytime there is four of something. So any story you read that has four in number of something, for those four things to exist, there has to be four levels or four different distinctions, like for them to be completely separate, they have to be separate, so they can't be identical. So they have to be four separate things, even though they're all a part of one group, So I know I said things, and that kind of gets a little vague, but um, and the four are all just individual manifestations of the one, because four is just four individuals, four ones, grouped together, and that's represented by a four. So the four doesn't actually exist. The four is just the concept of four ones. So, you know, numbers can be broken down into different numbers, which introduces different levels of different levels of numerology, and it's kind of a ever expanding thing where you can you can take the time of a video when you pause it and do a number reading based on what you're watching. You can really stretch it and make it so that numerology is kind of like something that gets in the way, very easily, because it's not necessarily useful. It's not necessarily something that you should spend all of your time doing. So it's very useful in that it cuts through some of the irrelevancies, but also it can make it so that you are not able to participate on a person-to-person level. So that's a big issue with numerology, and lots of people will get annoyed if you reduce everything to numerology out loud, because it takes away from the majesty of life and kind of makes it so that you're just like, oh yeah, you're right, congratulations, like who cares, fucking numerology, like whatever, but I think that that's pessimistic, and I think I just think that it's an overlay that just lets you have extra information, so it's not something that like determines everything, but it just lets you be familiar wherever you go, so it's like an orienting thing. Just it makes me feel more comfortable, I guess. And that's why I really prefer it, um, over not having it. So yeah. Oh, and the the Beatles are a really good manifestation of, if you're trying to look for, that four distinctions of personality, or like the Jackson Five with five distinctions, or like with three, you can look like the Trailer Park Boys, or Ed, Ed and Eddie. Those are really good exposés on trilogies, and dualism would be like Cat Dog, or um, anything else. I can't really think of any other dualism right now. And then, yeah, Pokemon would be a good trilogy: Rock, Ash, and Misty. Rock, water; Ash is fire or air. And there's got to be a fourth one. I don't know. But so, yeah, there's just these different stories that exist that we can just see these patterns. And once you apply this knowledge that's encoded in history and apply it to these different trilogies and different quadrilogies and pentaples, we see that these are just repeating stories that are, they have essential themes. Themes are always the same, and they're probably always the same because they're related in some way, because there's no way for things to not be interrelated and to exist in the same world, because we all come from the same stuff. So it's like, for us to be so distantly related, it just doesn't take into the account that we're all in the same situation, as far as we just exist on this planet. And what's it mean to exist? What's a planet? You know, all of those questions are like up for debate, and the answers that we have are based on like accepting an outside force saying this is what we sanctioned to be known or to be acceptable as knowledge regarding how the world exists. And that was the church for a long time, and then now it's science. And science basically is doing exactly what the church was doing, but it switched the faith with rationalism, and then kind of also at the same time demonizes individuals for using their own rationality. So it's like it puts people up on this platform where it's like people have the ability to be rational beings, and then at the same time chastises people for being rational beings. And it like it's got so much power that it can create rules and create reality, and then it can enforce reality. And that makes it so that it's no longer a free flowing exchange of ideas, and it's an imposition, based on these people being established in power hierarchies, and feeling threatened and trying to actively take action against people that are threatening them, even though we're just questioning pushed narratives. So um, yeah, not sure how I got there, but yeah, last thing I really wanted to talk about was musical ear. So musical ear is really like when you listen to music, it's taking the words, or the just the overall message of the music, and stripping away individual parts. So when an artist is singing lyrics, it's really, instead of hearing the specific words and the meanings of those words that the artist is saying at you, basically you're the target and they're saying, putting this energy towards you. The idea is to lazy eye here. The idea is to expand upon what you're hearing without limiting it to being exactly what it is. So it's basically breaking it down into, like, when I'm talking, it's interesting to pay attention to people talking, because all of the different noises that occur when I'm saying the overall message of what I'm saying, like all of these noises that are embedded in the overall message, you can focus in with a musical ear on those variations and articulations that people have, and let that be the music that you're listening to, instead of, oh baby I love you, all these basic lines in music nowadays that are just like it's so boring and repetitious. You can really reduce things down to their musical quality instead of being their direct, you know, uh, general translation. And it imbues everything that you listen to with this sense of majesty and wonder. Uh, and I've done this most of my life. It's just I listen to so much music, just really dissociating from the ability to communicate through words, and more trying to communicate through all of the things besides directly the words. So it's like directly speaking through speech is more for in-person communication, and when it's music, it's like the music is everything except for the speech. So it's just like the speech is required for it to be intelligible for people, but it being music is everything besides the intelligible part. It's the majesty and the mystery of the parts that don't quite make sense, and it is just noise and cacophony, but there's pattern there. There's recognizable energy there. There's resonance. So yeah, listening to music in a way where you're not just hearing the beats, you're trying to hear the individual artist performing the individual instrument in the individual way that they do, and breaking everything down into all of these different parts, instead of just, oh, that's just music that's just playing and it's just it's like, well, yeah, you're taking the majesty out of it, because you're just justing the F out of it. So giving things, allowing things to be magical and mysterious, and allowing yourself to not know every single thing about every single thing, especially when you're just listening to music. It's one of the most forgiving environments. You listening to music by yourself, like, there's nothing really more desirable than listening to music, in my book. Like, every minute of every day can be enhanced if you listen to music. Yeah, so that's just part of how I feel about music. And then musical intention is also just paying attention to the various elements of your life that seem to follow pattern in a musical way. So, for example, you just hear somebody taking out the garbage, and then somebody's doing the lawn, and somebody's washing their laundry, and somebody's, there's a jackhammer down the road. Being able to hear all of these things and intend for you hearing them to be something special, but then also know that it is special, while you're hearing and listening to it, and giving it and allowing it to have its own individual value and individual worth, its individual existence. It's not just like everything else, because it's not, but it is. But shh, because everything is literally all exactly the same. We generally don't take it in that direction. We're like, no, not everything's exactly the same, but we'll harp on how basically everything's the same. So we need to stop emphasizing how different we are. And it's like, well, you can't have that position. And then also, implicitly there's some bias if you're saying that no individual can be greater than the group except for you as an individual who is a part of the group, but you're a higher part of the group. It's just like, well, you're obviously separating at the individual level, so there's some chicanery going on there. But yeah, really just looking at information, looking at your life with musical intention, with artistic intention, and with the awareness that everything is art, and also that you are the creator of your circumstance. You might not be the creator of the world. You might not be the creator of the mechanisms that we find ourselves in. You might not be the creator of reality, but you are the creator of your own circumstance, because we're essentially plants that can get up out of our pots and walk around, but we still have to remain attached to the four elements: the earth, the water, the heat, and the air. We need these four levels of distinction in our lives to be fully functioning, aware, alive humans. And yeah, I think I will leave it at that. And a little shorter this time, but still fun as always to do these. And yeah, if you like the video, go ahead and hit that like button and the subscribe button. Hit the subscribe bell to get all those notifications. And yeah, thanks for watching, and catch you next time. Peace.